Yeah, speaking of older runners, are there any top runners in the past that you think don't get recognized like nowadays as much?
Ooh, old, yeah, yes, just yes. Yeah, he's super cool. I guess uh, I'm gonna say this wrong. Pahes Fohat, he's like a Finnish LASO player. He in like 2007, like when Halo 3 was new, he was just crushing LASO. He was getting like we had leaderboards for the scores, and he was just ruining everybody. He was just way better than anybody else. And I don't think he even put videos out. We just saw these unbelievable scores. Like people thought he was cheating. I think he's come back and done some more runs with videos and like shown that he is like a legit player. I've had no personal interactions with the guy. I've just heard of this like mysterious European legend who's been killing Lazo records for like the entire life of Halo 3. So yeah, I think those are the old legends that come to my mind.
I want all of you to cast your minds back to a better time, in
Pile up! Go,
2008.
go, go!
In particular, February
Up the
or
creek!
May,
Kill that
I can
ring!
never tell these dating conventions. If any of you remember the Bungie weekly updates, this one in particular sparked an interest in shifting the Halo franchise going forwards. History was made, so to speak. Scrolling past all these funny screenshots, they released some interesting stats which they declared mostly useless. How wrong they were. The two stats that raised the collective eyebrow of the Halo 3 community at the time were the LASO or SLASO stats they dropped here, announcing that 2 people in the world have completed every Halo 3 level, legendary with all skulls on, with 25 players having completed at least one level. Now this begs the question, who were the 2 people? A thread was created by Sonic John, documenting LASO progress before this weekly update, creating a thread on the 10th of November 2007, even going as far as tracking fastest overall completions. Across a mix of solo and co-op runs, the game had been beaten, and the summer best was around 10 hours. But no single player had beaten every level. A runner called Poop is Good 007 was closest, missing just a couple levels, but this thread never really caught traction and it eventually died out. A second thread was created on the 21st of May 2008, a few weeks after the weekly update, by a name some of you may be familiar with, Tyrant, one half of the Naked Tyrant achievements, also now known as Mythic Tyrant. He begins to chronicle his adventures through LASO. A day after this thread was created, a man comes forward to claim to be one of the 2 people who finished Halo 3 on LASO. His name, I'm not sure how to pronounce, but I'm going to cleverly evade it for the rest of the video. Arhat Pojat, something like that. Translating roughly to bad boys in Finnish, which actually brings forward another point. The second person that Bungie mentioned was never identified, nor came forward after this claim, which remains a mystery today. Quickly doubling back to Sonic John, he ran a website known as HaloRaiders.org, which I discovered during research for this video. He had documented the original times from the enigmatic bad boy from Finland. We can see what his first times are across the board. Remember, this is so long ago, the term speedrun didn't exist, and these were referred to as dash bashes. With a total time of 6 hours, 2 minutes and 43 seconds across the board, deemed super fast times in 2008, he would hold all records with the exception to 2, Floodgate being held by Poop is Good 007, and Halo being held by Sonic John himself. This was all accomplished within 210 days of the game's release, a mere 6 months. Generally speaking, player skill was low, and understanding of the game had barely even begun. Taking it upon himself to do the impossible, and really not enjoying Poop, the bad boy took it even further and improved his times, bringing the total time across the board down to 5 hours, 55 minutes and 24 seconds, knocking Floodgate, Cortana and Halo times down. A few weeks later, around the time that Bungie posted that weekly update, the times were improved once again, even further to 5 hours, 21 minutes and 49 seconds. This time, unfortunately, without being able to see where the improvement was. Comparing to the post after this versus the post before, I worked out that it dropped Sierra by 5 minutes and Crows by almost 30. Also commenting that the bad boy was recognised as one of the only 2 people in the community who finished LASO. Sonic John would post a couple threads attempting to reach out to the other mysterious individual, but would unfortunately never be successful. The final update to HaloRaiders.org would come on the 22nd of May 2008, noting that the times had once again dropped significantly, dropping Salvo by 33 minutes, Storm by 21 minutes, Halo by 1 minute, bringing the sum of all times across the board to 4 hours, 25 minutes and 18 seconds. smashing the goal of LASO under 7. Before most people had even heard of LASO, this absolute demon from Finland was out there improving his times and absolutely decimating a category no one had ever heard of. Not only that, an incredibly difficult and challenging category, still proving a formidable accomplishment today, with it being one of the rarest achievements in MCC. Leaving HaloRaiders.org behind, and heading over to High Speed Halo, we see LASO introduced into a speedrun setting. As noted in the post, LASO did exist prior to this, with runs being finished in Halo 2. However, moving to Halo 3, with post-game carnage reports, it'd been possible to verify all skulls are in fact used. He submits his crow's nest and floodgate times, opening the floodgates to the world to witness his domination. Because believe me, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. Now, we need to deviate slightly, because there was another beast brewing simultaneously. I need to introduce you all to the brief world of High Score Halo. So before we delve into this, I want to quickly explain what a score run is. A quick rundown would be runners are awarded base points for killing enemies. Pretty simple. Typically, the harder the enemy, the more points earned. This base score can then receive different types of multipliers. Difficulty, skull, medal combos, and finally a time multiplier. The idea being to try to combine as many multipliers as possible to achieve the highest score. With Halo 3's release and the introduction of a scoring system, Cody Miller proposed a challenge of trying to accumulate 1 million points across the entire campaign, which only took 17 hours. It's taken only 6 missions to hit the 1 million point goal. The idea of 2 million was proposed, but the idea died out for a while, until a few months later a new thread emerged on High Speed Halo's forums. Runners began pushing the score up more and more, Goat Rope, Malu, and Bonekin being the initial contributors to score runs. On January 30th, the total score across the campaign sat at 1,332,446 points. Still missing submissions from Sierra and the Storm. A few months would pass until a Sierra run would be submitted. 159,000 on normal by the Coffin Dodger, pushing the total up to 1,491,881, with 500,000 points to go. Now, remember the Bungie weekly update I mentioned at the start of the video? They also had posted high scores for campaign, which included group total alongside single player. But comparing their numbers to what was tracked on High Score Halo, the numbers didn't appear entirely accurate, with a higher score tracked for Crow's Nest on High Score Halo, but a lower one by Bungie. Which does lend some speculation into whether or not they actually were correct about a second person having beaten every IO on LASO. Anyway, back to the topic on hand. We welcome back our protagonist. LASO wasn't enough to satisfy his hunger. He also set his sights on high score runs. On the 9th of June, he would submit 5 high score runs, and a day later, he would submit the remaining 4, improving his Crow's Nest on 20th of June, 2008. By the 20th, here's how the scores stood. An absolutely insane improvement of over 600,000 points, smashing the 2 million goal. But that's not all. A post a day earlier on High Speed Halo also includes a LASO submission from the Finnish monster, dropping his LASO Halo run by 13 seconds, to 13:47. This is what the current standings for LASO were at this time. I want to take a moment to remind you all, at this point in time, there was no one even close to competing with this guy. There were only 2 or 3 people at the time who were even trying their hand at LASO, and that was purely for level completion. This guy was on a level of his own by speedrunning LASO. Now, unfortunately, footage of these early LASO or high score videos, you guessed it, are pretty rare. They're either 240p, over an hour long, or simply don't exist. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of purpose in showing them, but I do highly suggest you check them out in your own time. But don't worry, we'll get around to the later ones. Over the next few months, he would continue to push up the high score runs, ignoring LASO for the time being. Taking one level at a time, he would demonstrate the scariest ability he had in my opinion, his relentlessness, and how quickly he was able to set records. Something we'll see a lot of as time goes on. He would set 5 high score records over a span of 6 days, then the remaining 2 just a few days later, breaking the final high score record on the 4th of October, and breaking the 3 million point goal, announcing his retirement, unless someone were to beat any of his records. Here's how the final push to 3 million points looked, just scraping by to break the massive milestone. Incredibly, these records still stand today, with the leaderboard per level being displayed here. A solid second place across the board as well. but not quite good enough to dethrone our Finnish hero. It's impressive to see how far ahead he is, compared to everyone else on this leaderboard. It's a little tough to compare or compete to MCC Halo 3 because the scoring system was changed, but as far as the 360 version goes, these records have lasted over 5,700 days, or 15 years and 7 months. Possibly some of the longest records of all time. But now the high score runs had been mastered, it took his attention full time back to LASO. This is where he struck fear into the hearts of the average man. In October, he'd once again drop 3 more level times: Sierra, Rose, and the Ark. Definitely the hardest levels to do LASO. But this is where things start to get interesting. Up to this point, there has been absolutely no competition, no one challenging any records set. But we would finally see a challenger enter the arena the 1st of January 2009. A young 14-year-old version of myself, which was beaten within 5 days. However, it was a demonstration that it's possible to beat this guy. I felt a taste of the ferociousness of Finland, but I did not let it put me off. I went back to the grind, carried on attempting. Meanwhile, further runs were improved, attempting more and more to push them out of the reach of regular humans. Salvo, we dropped to a 655, Floodgate to a 411. Parhat would spend the next few months working on, in my opinion, the hardest Halo 3 LASO level, dropping it to an insane 29-minute time. And just to prove his absolute dominance, he would then drop his Halo IL to 12:26 just 4 days later, being only 28 seconds slower than the regular legendary record. This is a run I actually want to talk about, because for its time it's unbelievable. He hits fast spire climb. He uses the hammer to propel himself up the spire faster, then proceeds to just fight the flood head on. Any LASO guide you watch for this level will tell you to sit back and hide for this fight.
The ammo, so that'll run out after a few shots. But this one, we could keep firing all day. We could just stay all the way back here from the safety of this cliff. They could still shoot at you, especially those ranged forms.
I tried for months to beat this IL. I think at most, I'm in within 15 seconds of it or so, but never once been able to take down this Titan run. He even hits 3rd roundabout skip. A level that had received absolutely zero attention from the Finnish champion since April 2008 was the Covenants, which was his initial completion of the level. He spent the next few months after his Halo run practicing and learning the level, dropping an incredible 40 minutes, bringing it down to a 27:53, the 14th of June 2009, which featured this little trick jump, which blew my mind. These series of jumps might not look impressive, but I challenge you to try them yourselves. Definitely harder than it looks. A prominent legendary runner would drop Salvo on the 22nd of June 2009, just to be instantly slapped down by a Finnish legend. Cheese Like a 92 would drop Salvo to a 411, to be beaten the very same day with a 356. I hope you're starting to get the idea now. This guy did not like to lose his records. That was until Rawson came along, hitting this crazy box launch. We would see our first record permanently swap hands, never go back to the champion. Rawson would beat Floodgate in 3:44 on his debut to speedrunning, leaving only 8 records left. Would this be the start of the downfall of our hero? In August, he would improve Cortana to 7:46, which at the time was faster than the legendary record. How insane is that? "9 months later, I gave birth to a new Storm record. Yes, it took me 9 months to grind in, and I remember doing it nearly every single day. I failed school, but I set a cool world record. However, I enraged the bad boy. He struck me down twice in one day. I set a 12:23, and he dropped it to 11:18, then a 9:53. I was done for. Or was I? Now, dates going forward get a bit hazy, with the death and decay of High Speed Halo. I had a quick skim through the High Speed Halo submissions queue, and I noticed a few interesting things that I wasn't ever aware of. It turns out there are a lot more LASO records that were discarded. Unfortunately, never seen the light of day. Records that I did not know even existed until right now. I found evidence of a 40-minute Covenant, which I could not find a video nor a news post for. Which I guess doesn't really matter, because he beat it anyway. He had a LASO crow's nest time that beat the final time we ever saw from him. His last published run was a 22:15, but according to this, it is 17:32. But over the next few months, he'll drop a few more world records, the final world records he would ever set. This would, unfortunately, be the last we would ever see of our Finnish champion. The final of Parhat's world records came like this. At least for now, I will clarify a bit further in a second. But an absolutely insane improvement from the first times he set. To push the game this far, pretty much all by himself. An accomplishment that is absolutely deserving of commendation. 1 hour and 51 minutes being the sum of ILs. This time would still be a very respectful full game legendary time even today. Now, there was a faster Sierra time. I did eventually beat the 11:04 time he held by a single second. I do recall seeing him set a 9-minute time, but without any remaining evidence of this, I cannot really say the time frame of when this occurred. I just know it exists. But after this, he never really came back. Also, on the topic of unconfirmed events, Paradoxic also recalls an apparent full game LASO run, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, but take with a grain of salt. He was obviously very well equipped to achieve such an accomplishment, but with no evidence beyond this one claim, it's impossible to know for sure. This would lead us to the 14-year endeavour to try to break his records. It would take the collective community years to slowly break his records. Years of the run developing, a variety of new strategies, and far more skilled runners would eventually emerge. As we come to the end of this video, I want to show you the first few minutes of his Arc LASO run. I think this is by far his best display of skill. Naked Eli would be the first to take down one of his times after his retirement, beating his Cortana run by 1 second, taking it down to a 7:45. Not quite knowing the exact date for this, it would have been sometime before August 6, 2010. In a similar fashion, 2 years after the Storm double dunking on me, almost 3 years to the day since my first Storm LASO run, January 11th, 2012, I eventually got my revenge, taking his record down by 2 seconds. It took me 2 years to push 2 seconds off his record. And as I previously mentioned, I did drop his Sierra to an 11:03 in September 2012, unfortunately losing a massive amount of time in the dam section. LASO fell into silence for a few years after this, but it would get its return. Sorix would improve Parhat's lost 9-minute Sierra run, dropping it to an incredible 7:31 in 2018. Much closer to the regular legendary time, the route now being pretty much identical to a regular legendary run with all the same skips. But the big push to dethrone Parhat would come from Sasquatch in 2022. Through most of 2022, we would take majority of the ILs, with the game changing significantly. Skips such as a Storm Scarab skip being discovered. It would make breaking these age-old records significantly easier. Sasquatch would take every IL, with the exception of Covenant and the Ark. The last 2 levels belong to the Finnish champion, bringing the route much more in line with legendary records. An interesting change in Sasquatch's Halo IL is he actually hides for most of the spy fight, lasering from the ledge above. It would be in 2023 we see Parhat's final 2 records fall, the Ark and the Covenant. Larko Angel would drop 4 minutes from the Covenant and 5 minutes from the Ark. With the new tank out of bounds and the same Dawn clear they do on Legendary, he's able to knock a lot of time off the old tank route. Small changes to the Covenant definitely also helped. Hijacking the AA Wraith to skip the beach clear, and the diagonal flying on the Hornet are a few examples. Going down as one of the best players of all time to those who remember him, but mostly being forgotten. I do often wonder how he would compare today, or how he would have compared in other categories during his prime. He was able to stand his ground against titans of the community. Runners like Malu and Cheese Like a 92 had previously solidified themselves as some of the best runners at the time, and even they stood no chance when up against this guy. He laid the foundation for the entire generation of gamers to come. His routine, strategies, and incredible skill led to accomplishments years later. He basically defined an entire new category of speedruns, by being the pioneer of LASO, something most people had never even heard of prior. Thesis finishing Halo 3 LASO full game single segment was largely thanks to Parhat's strategies he developed 15 years prior. Hopefully, his legacy will live on. He is the sole reason I began to speedrun. Being an extremely ambitious 14-year-old, I set my sights on what I deemed impossible, breaking some of these incredibly difficult records. Never being able to live up to his skill, and it taken me far longer to set records, but I never gave up trying. It was a personal accomplishment to beat some of his records using the same strats. Thank you for watching.